I wanted to talk about viability at the farm level. I feel, and there's lots of studies that show this, that a lot of the risk of our food system is borne by our farmers. And I think we need to think differently about how we share risk and reward across our entire food system, not just at the farm level. So profitability, often we single that out as the only measure of success, right? We're all thinking economics. Well, there's so many other measures of success, and we all need farms, especially organic farms. Why we want to have organic farms is they do much more than just grow food. They sequester carbon, they take care of our water system, they clean our air, they provide good paying jobs for lots of individuals. And guess what? Eating organic food, growing organic food makes us all more healthy. And the challenge, though, is that we can't build soil organic matter on a quarterly profit reporting cycle. And many of you may know this, but the statistics from USDA show that net farm median income has been negative from 1996 to 2018. 2019, that number actually became positive to the tune of $293. 2020, net median farm income is projected to be just over $1,000. You can't live on $1,000. And the only reason those are positive is due to an additional increased government subsidy programs. So I feel we have a opportunity in the organic sector because we're looking very differently at what our farm level production systems are. We need to look really differently about the rest of that supply chain and the system that enables good organic production to happen. Farms really are the heart. If you think about our food system as an organism, the farm, in my mind, is really the heart of that organism, because if you don't have a healthy heart, you're not going to have a healthy rest of the organism. So I'm excited to talk to the variety of panelists we have today and hear their ideas around how we can better share risk and reward across the entire food system, and make a system that works better for all of us. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna pull up a slide that has a bio for each of our panelists, and the panelists are gonna introduce themselves, and then just tell me a little bit about your work and how you're impacting the viability and sustainability in organic systems, particularly helping farms. So Rosalie, you're gonna be up first, and let me share my screen and we will get going.
Thanks, Anna. Just give me a sec to make everything go back on my thing here.
All right, here you go. Here's Rosalie, a bit about her. And I think if you have your screen set up, you can see her while she talks and read her bio.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Well, I love your words, and I love your framing of this issue to go from profitability to viability. And it's just a perfect frame for this topic. I have so many thoughts, but let me narrow down. What I do is I work with foundations principally on impact investing strategies. And then I also help foundations to underwrite specific deals or transactions. I have a background in small business lending and used to run Montana Community Development Corporation here in Montana, which is now MoFi. And I've done some poking around to find out, you know, what impact investing options there are for organic farming, because of all these impacts that you've mentioned, Anna, how important it is to the environment. And I would say right now it's really disjointed and a little bit of a haphazard system for me to be able to tell you as producers where you would go to get impact investing. And we could talk more about this as we go through the thing today, because I'm sure people will start talking about the need for financing to make an organic farm work, and how the actual problem right now is that the traditional financing tool, which is you give me security in your land and I'll give you operating money, is just really not working. And it's saddling people both with debt service that they can't afford, and they may not have the actual assets to do that loan. So what you have right now is impact investors saying, hey, we're really interested, but we just don't see a mechanism. We just don't see a deal structure that works. Well, Anna, a lot of that has to do with the fact of those negative operating incomes. So we need to do some work actually on the actual mechanism for financing organic agriculture. And I'm really excited to think more about that and talk more about it as we go forward. So that's probably, is that good for?
Yeah, that's a great frame. Thanks so much, Rosalie, for that. Yeah, and I'm excited to dive in a little bit more about that mechanism, because it feels like not only do we have net negative farm income and challenges on the farm side, but the system, again, this idea of sharing risk, like everybody else gets paid first. I pay all of my people that loan me money first. I pay all of my landowners first. I pay all of my fuel suppliers and seed suppliers first. And so what do we need to do to shake that up?
Yep.
So hold that thought, and we're going to shift to the Brandy's up next. Brandy, take it away. You're going to talk a little bit about the other end of the food system.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today. I'm just going to share my screen here. I've got a presentation. Okay. Can everybody see this?
I see it, Brandy.
Okay, great. Well, hi. Today I'm going to talk about incorporating local products into your school food program. My name is Brandy Dreibelbis, and I'm the Director of School Food Operations for the Chef Am Foundation. The Chef Am Foundation is a national organization that is dedicated to promoting scratch cooking in schools across the country. And one of my main duties at the Chef Am Foundation is to provide hands-on support to school districts that are part of the Get Schools Cooking Grant. The Get Schools Cooking Grant is an intensive 3-year assessment with a strategic planning program that provides schools with the operational knowledge to transition from a heat and serve program to a scratch cooked operational model. We feel that this is the best approach to serve the healthiest meals to children so that they are ready to learn. Since 2016, we have worked with 4 different cohorts of school districts from across the country. These are the school districts listed in front of you. And prior to joining the Chef Am Foundation this past August, I was the Food Services Director for the Napa Valley Unified School District in Napa, California for 3 years. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I was able to make local products successful in our school food program in Napa. But first, before talking about Napa Valley Unified School District, I always like to paint a little bit of a picture about what life was really like in Napa Valley, because it wasn't what people had in mind when they think about a vacation to the Napa Valley. We were an agricultural community with a large immigrant population. We serviced 16,800 students across 26 schools. We had a 60% Latinx population, and over 55% of our students qualified for the free and reduced lunch population, which meant that we had a huge food insecure family. And there was a large push from our community to change the food that we were serving to our students in school. When I got to Napa in July of 2017, one of the first big changes that I made was learning about what local foods were available to me in our area to incorporate into our menu. So I began reaching out to ranchers and fishermen in the area. And I started purchasing chicken from Foster Farms, which was in the Central Valley of California. We were purchasing raw chicken on the bone, chicken drumsticks and chicken wings. The chicken was hormone and antibiotic free. And this was the first time we were introducing real chicken on the bone to our students. And this is the first time we were bringing in raw proteins to our program. We started purchasing from a company called Real Good Fish, which ran a seafood CSA from the Monterey Bay area. They were buying Pacific Grenadier, which was at one time considered a trash fish. They sold it to us at a low margin, so we were able to incorporate raw real fish onto our menu for fish tacos. We purchased burgers, which slowly became our most popular menu item, from a company called Mindful Meats in Marin County. We were purchasing them raw. They were hormone and antibiotic free, non-GMO, and organic. And not only were we educating our students and staff about high quality proteins and showing them that these foods tasted better, but we were able to reduce the carbon footprint and help support our local economy. One of my favorite parts of living in California was the year-round growing season and the amazing produce that was available to us. So we implemented salad bars in all of our cafeterias and used them as part of the reimbursable meal, which meant that students were required to take something from the salad bars. We had a seasonal salad bar grid, and we only served fresh fruits and vegetables. So we were educating our students about seasonality. Over the 3 years that I was in Napa, about 97% of the produce we purchased came from the state of California. We were educating our kids to take what they want and to eat what they take, and we were creating less food waste by having the kids serve themselves. There's a place on school food menus as well for prepared foods, and I learned about green chili and cheese tamales from a local company. We also purchased organic cheese sauce and incorporated that into 2 different menu items. We were also buying local bagels, tortilla chips, and tortillas. Some of these menu items were just too time consuming or labor intensive to make in-house, but were great additions to our menu. And by this, we were supporting local businesses and producers as well. But there's a lot that goes into making local purchases successful on your school food menu. And these were some of the key points that we had to work on first: staff training and professional development, procurement, salad bars, equipment and facilities, marketing our program, and creating a better menu. First and foremost was staff training and professional development. By educating your staff about why you're serving kids healthy food throughout the school day and teaching them what this food should look like and taste like, you're allowing them to be part of the menu planning process, and they're buying into your program. Procurement. Network with growers and learn about what is grown and produced in your area. Expand your local purchasing by knowing your food budget and your participation rate. Salad bars in schools. I mentioned this earlier, and at the Chef Ann Foundation, we are big advocates of salad bars in schools. We feel that this is the best way for kids to get fresh fruits and vegetables. Equipment and facilities. Does your school food program have adequate facilities to be able to cook from scratch or to bring in raw proteins? I was fortunate over the 3 years that I was in Napa Valley Unified School District that we had a bond where we were able to build out an existing building and turn it into a central kitchen. And we remodeled 7 elementary schools into finishing kitchens while I was there. By bringing in new equipment, we were increasing our food quality, which was directly increasing our participation rate. Marketing. When we first became a self-operated program in Napa, I branded our program NOSH. NOSH is an acronym. It stands for Napa's Operative for School Food Health. I chose NOSH because I felt like NOSH was a foodie term. Napa was a foodie town, and at the end of the day, I wanted our school food program to be a part of that conversation. We created a robust social media platform, and we held tasting events for the students with our new menu items, and even invited farmers to be a part of this process. By branding our program, we were creating an awareness in the community. And by the end of my 3 years in Napa, NOSH was a well-recognized name. Menu. We believe in creating a menu a year in advance. We believe in cycle menus. We also believe in offering vegetarian items on your menu. By planning your menu in advance and working with vendors, you can project your meals and your needs in advance so that they can see the true purchasing impact over the course of a school year. And in conclusion, school food programs and locally grown and produced products can create a tremendous impact on the local economy and the health of school-age students. So there's a huge place for local on school food menus. Thanks.
Guys, thanks, Brandy. That's been what a great story, because you, in a way, are encapsulated the whole food system. So it wasn't just about changing how farmers farm or changing how kids eat. You actually had to put all those pieces together. You had to get a kitchen. You had to figure out the supply chain. You had to actually buy ovens, and then you had to actually get people to eat the food. So I'm starting to circle back on that, because I think that's a really magical little case study about what we need to do across the entire food system.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Okay, here, let me screen share again. Next up is Jennifer with Farm Credit, and I'm excited to have more of a traditional lender here. But Jennifer, please take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself and what is Farm Credit doing around this idea of farm viability?
Yep, so I'm with Northwest Farm Credit here in Havre, Montana. We are a farm-focused lender. We utilize different types of financing products to help support agriculture. We also offer crop insurance to help mitigate risk to our farmers. I specifically work with a lot of organic farmers on the High Line and helping them understand this is how to make their operation successful, utilizing things like operating loans that mirror how how long it takes their products to be sold and financing those input costs. We utilize intermediate term loans to help fund things such as combine purchases, tractor purchases, and then also land loans that mirror how long it would take to pay those back. Really, our goal is to help be a partner with farmers and help understand what they want to accomplish, looking at their growth and business strategies and helping them to create a business plan that's successful. We recognize that this takes a lot of different approaches. We utilize working with the Farm Service Agency to do different kind of financing options and helping us be a little bit more risky in some new startup ventures. So just a lot of different things to help agriculture. We are solely focused on agriculture. So that's one thing that differentiates us from traditional banks. And most of our employees are actually farmers themselves. We have a farm operation here in Kremlin. So live it, breathe it, and do everything we can to help farm be successful on the High Line. That's all I have, I guess. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to help them. One thing I would add is that I saw some comments about profitability in agriculture, and I personally see a lot of profitability. It takes some time to build that up, but we do see success building and people being able to be successful on the organic side and conventional side.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. And I'm anxious to learn a little bit more about this, what you see from your chair around organic in particular, and what things are really working for organic producers, and how we get better to that farm viability, which is long-term viability, not just year-to-year profitability. All right, let me introduce another panelist. Nathan is with us. Bluestone helped to do some of the behind-the-scenes work and sponsor for this panel. And so Nathan, come up on screen, and thanks for sharing a little bit about how we manage our own personal risk. You know, managing a farm, you think about the farm, it's kind of its own being. I mean, Doug and I joke like it's a whole nother member of our family that requires care and feeding, but you can't do that care and feeding of your own organic farm unless you're actually taking care of yourself. So Nathan, take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself and your thoughts on farm viability.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. Really, for Bluestone Life, our business is about utilizing the scale and influence of the financial industry, and in particular, the life insurance industry, to directly support farms and healthy food systems. Having been in financial services for a long time, I came to see history of the financial services industry often was extractive, and we really wanted to find a way to turn that towards, adding value. I think like a lot of people, it was once I had a family and realized how critical food was, I started paying a lot more attention. For us, we came about it and said, how can we utilize the business model, to create as much positive change as possible? And again, seeing food constantly stand out as one of those areas. What Bluestone did is partnered with a 130-year-old insurance company in Nebraska to offer products in a way that took some of the profit out of the system and sent it to primarily high impact nonprofits. We do this in 3 ways, but every customer that works with Bluestone contributes directly to organizations like MOA, the Rodale Institute. We actually made our first contribution to MoFi last month, and the Chef-Ann Foundation. And we came about that because we could see you need the soil science. Obviously, you need the people actually doing the work and growing the food. And then as you saw with Brandy, what really large systems are out there that could purchase a tremendous amount of the right kind of food to help create change. So the way Bluestone is structured, that a percent of all premiums that come in nationally are given each year in cash as donations to organizations like MOA. We're also prompting the insurance company we're partnered with to have more of their own assets be invested in projects that can help. And that's where it ties into some of the work that Rosalie does. And then the third part of how we do it is every customer gets a free additional death benefit when they're a customer, and they get to choose the high impact nonprofit of their choice to support with that at no additional cost. So that can come back to organizations like MOA and MoFi and the Chef Ann Foundation. So primarily we're here to support all the amazing work the other organizations and farms are doing, and open for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. It's, who would have thought life insurance can enable viable organic farming? That's a kind of a neat connection to make, because we're really all more connected than what we think we are is readily apparent right away. I'm not sure if David LeZaks is on yet. Can someone tell me? I can't see the chat. Maybe not. But David will be our last speaker. He unfortunately had conflicts, so will probably be with us in another 5 minutes or so. But David's done a lot of work in food systems, regenerative food systems, and we'll be back to talk to us a little bit more about the connections of the work that he's doing and how ideas such as funding scenarios that are being used for renewable energy might actually be applied to funding for organic systems. So stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. And if all of my panelists just stay on screen, let's see, where do we wanna take this conversation? I mean, maybe I'll kick it back to Rosalie. There's so much discussion about finance, and much like a farm, an organic farm has a crop rotation, and so we never grow the one thing at a time, we grow multiple things. At least on our operation, we've had to figure out how we have multiple sources of funding and support for our farm. So tell me a little bit about that landscape and how you would suggest we begin to connect the dots on pulling together multiple sources, because it's hard to take someone like maybe Jennifer in Farm Credit that has their system and connect that with some more philanthropic or other sources of funding that might have different terms.
I wonder if Jennifer would be willing to do this with me. Are you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Because really, I think you start with the conventional system. The conventional system is there because it's built a model that works, and it costs out kind of in a, if you're under the bell curve for a lot of stuff under the bell curve. And maybe when we're starting to deal with organic, and especially transition to organic, we're getting a little bit into, out of the normal or into stuff that needs longer term financing. Jennifer, what do you see as like easy to finance, and where do you see saying to people, geez, you need a different kind of financing for that, if I can kind of draw you in?
Yep, absolutely. So I don't know that we look at just one portion of a business. We look at the business as a whole. So I think you have to take a step back and look at what your goal is in your operation and what you're needing to finance, and how you're planning on to finance that. Because there's a couple models, right? You're going to either look at potentially using working capital if you have that cash flow or inventory on hand, or you may be looking to using a debt source, whether it's a loan or looking at potentially a grant through, the state has some grant options, or what that may look like. And how do you cash flow that? And how long does it take you to repay that? And what does that look like? And is it, to the point of the conversation, is it viable or sustainable over a period of time? Because the goal, at least in our minds, is to keep farmers in business, is to help them be successful, to feed our population. So I think you just got to take a step back and look at what you want to do. And then we need to put in tools and pull in different options to make that successful for you. I don't know if that quite answered what you were getting at, Rosalie.
Well, it does. I mean, it's kind of like there's these elements. So I guess maybe element one is, what is your personal asset base? And that comes down to, does the farmer own the land, or at least, because then you've got that big asset underneath you, and that's super financeable.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the land. I think that the good thing to start with is understanding what you have from a balance sheet perspective, putting together your financial statement and understanding, okay, what do I own? Who do I owe? And what does that look like? And then where do I want to get to? And what tools can we utilize to get you to point B from A to B? You know, whether, I mean, yes, the land is a resource, but we typically as a lender don't look to secure operating needs with land. We look at utilizing, you know, what that value of that crop would be at the end of the operating cycle to finance that and to fund that, you know, matching your income source to your repayment ability.
So in this sector, who has trouble getting financing? What are the issues? What's the barriers?
I think the barriers to entry in any farming operation is the startup capital. Is looking at, you know, there's a 3-tiered approach. You've got the ability for operating funding, you've got the machinery, those assets, and then you've got the access to the land. And maybe that land is not a purchase, but it's a lease option. And working with the landowner, if you can't own the land, to be able to make a lease agreement that works, that you can be profitable and that the landowner can fund their costs as well.
And what have you seen people plug in for niche financing then when you guys can't come in?
Well, I mean, the Farm Service Agency is essentially referred to as the lender of last resort. So, I mean, they typically have some options, especially in some more highly leveraged operations, to be able to cash flow that or do some different structures to help fund those for over maybe like an equipment purchase over a longer period of time. If you're buying some more organic cows, can you fund that over a 7-year period versus a 5-year period? But I think you got to be a little cautious on the life of the asset too, right? I mean, if your tractor is only going to be viable for 4 or 5 years, you don't want to be paying for that for 10. That doesn't quite work in any system, right? So I think you got to understand what you're trying to accomplish, and does that make sense to fulfill what you're trying to do?
Well, I really feel like we should honor Jeff, who just is asking so often about this profitability question. Let's go there. That is the question, Jeff. Did you want to say something before we blab on about it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I respect the idea of viability, and even our project has a huge amount of the proposal that I've been working on. So I've been thinking about this issue a lot. That's why I'm agitated. But is that, you know, there are a lot of non-economic barriers to becoming an organic farmer, and when we ask organic farmers, which we have done in research for 4 years, you know, they do not say because I can make more money as the primary or necessarily and certainly not the only reason they become organic. And I'm very attuned to that and keen on that. And I know we don't live our world, you know, thinking about only our profitability, but in the end, I will argue there's no viability. There's no all those wonderful things that these farms can provide. If they can't stay in business, if they go out of business, none of those extra services are provided. So there's, you know, I guess I'm being a little hard ass here, but if you can't, and I don't mean it in a year-to-year basis. I also mean, like, let's look in 5-year perspective. If a farm can't retain a certain amount of profitability over, let's say on average over a 5-year period, there's something going wrong and there's going to be a problem. And what really strikes me is that we continually see the prices, even at the farm level, 2 to 3 times the value of non-organic crops, the same crops, yet people aren't going into it because of that. Now there's arguments about their costs being different, and they are certainly different. Certainly there are yield differences at first, but if you take a 5-year perspective, my hypothesis is an organic farm ought to be damn profitable, and yet we don't see people going into it. And there's even research that suggests that we might be fooling ourselves and thinking it is profitable. So I guess
thanks, Jeff.
Way too much, but
thanks, Rosalie.
I'm going to turn that back to you, Anna, and you let me know if you want me.
Thanks. No, I love this kind of self-organization of the panel. This is what I had hoped would happen. So, you know, I think to Jeff's point, the experience that Doug and I have had is it's not, there's so many other variables and complexities around running an organic farm. you have many multiple crops. You don't have one or two, which is what our conventional neighbors have. You have many different buyers. And part of the challenge of the buyers is that whole rest of the system is not necessarily set up to service an organic farm or take the product in the same way that our basic commodity supply chain has. So, you know, we still have crops sitting in the bin from 2019. And if that's not paid for, it makes it really hard to pay off your line of credit, which makes it really hard for a traditional lender to say, hey, you got the crop, but is your buyer taking it? So, you know, and then there's a climate change overlay of weather variability around this. So trying to connect the dots on what I see is we need a fundamentally different system of finance and supply chain. That takes a lot of hard work. So I want to shift back here to Brandy. Kate put a question in the chat for Brandy about what did it take for the school district to buy into that extra coordination and costs related to farm and school? And I think, again, that's kind of a little peek of one example of where we need this much larger change around coordination. So go ahead, Brandy, and I won't read the whole question unless you, because I'm assuming you can see it.
Yeah, so the Napa Valley Unified School District had actually outsourced their school food program for 33 years prior to me arriving. So, you know, that was actually costing the school district a lot of money. And it was basically a heat and serve program. So there was a lot of products that were purchased that were just heated up and served. So the cost had been going up and the food had been going downhill, and the food had been so bad that the kids really weren't buying into the program. So when I came in, we became a self-operated program. We were saving money by not paying that outside food services management company. But also what I did was I really went to work on the menu. There was a lot of prepackaged single served items that were being bought, and I eliminated all of those. We started buying in bulk. By creating a cycle menu that repeats itself throughout the school year, I had a 6-week cycle menu. You're able to really project what you need throughout the school year and work with your vendors. When vendors, you know, hear the sheer volume of food that you'll be buying over the course of the year, it really helps with your purchasing power. We were serving 8,000 kids a day. That was breakfast and lunch. So over the course of 180 days of school, that's a lot of food that we're purchasing. You know, I was really fortunate to have the bond that was passed in Napa a year prior to me arriving. And part of that money was dedicated to improving some of our facilities. So I was fortunate with that. But even just by remodeling our central kitchen and bringing in some modern equipment, it really made my staff more efficient, which directly improved food quality, which directly increased our participation in the program as well. And I applied for a lot of grants while I was there as well. So I became very good at writing grants, and that was how we were able to start marketing and branding our program as well.
Wow, thanks for that. And in the idea of being a self-moderated panel, do you have questions for the other panelists? And please, if anyone has questions, put them in the chat. And if not, I'll just make another comment here as Brandy. It strikes me that your discussion about moving from prepared food, right? So things that come in packages that make it an easy recipe. That's also kind of a really interesting analogy to transitioning to organic as a farming system, because you're going to move from buying prepackaged fertilizers and herbicides into a system that really requires you to look at your land and think about what the land needs and doing things from within your farm versus buying a preset of packaged inputs. So I'm having fun on this analogy. Other questions people have off the top before I jump into another? Nathan, let me kick it to you. Tell us a little bit about some of your other work around 1% for the planet, or things you've invested in, and what outcomes you've seen, or what makes you most excited about that business model that you've set up.
Yeah, for us, it's I think a big part of it is seeing more people paying attention to their daily choices. And we have a whole theme we constantly put out about your choices matter, and that a lot of people's initial reaction is, the systems are too big and complicated, and how can one person help? But we find over and over that within food and finance, I mean, everybody's touching their food on a daily basis. And the same with finance, even if you don't think about it, where you bank, what credit card you use, where you purchase your insurance, where your IRA might be invested, all those things actually have a pretty big impact. So that's part of it for us, is getting people to realize relatively small changes in behavior actually change, the economic impact significantly. That's why we just kept coming back to food, and there seemed to be so many intersections between food and finance, which determine things, what got financed and what didn't. That's what led us to the Sheehy Foundation, as we were looking, what are the biggest systems? One family at a time is also great. You get to know your local farm, and then you bring your friends there. But we also wanted to know, once my daughter was born, started thinking about that, where are enormous systems where you can change things. Again, that's what led us to the Sheehy Foundation. And we were just amazed, like how amazed I am by my local organic farm where I get most of my food. I just can't believe how much work they do and how much they accomplish with a small team. And we saw the same thing at the Sheehy Foundation. We just couldn't believe they'd managed to do these programs in all 50 states. And then once we saw the local food purchases, that really caught our attention, and how could the financial industry help finance things like central kitchens, if that could help, drastically increase the amount of in-state food purchases. And then if you already have the foundation that has the expertise to set it up and get it running, we were excited to see how something as boring as the life insurance industry could put a lot of money behind that and support the exciting work of farms and foundations.
Well, thanks, Nathan. That idea of day-to-day choices and rethinking how we do those or make those day-to-day choices happen differently to bring into being the thing that we envision for ourselves. That's a pretty powerful message. I'm looking at the chat here. So Earle, you had talked about where do you want to go or be as a farmer in the long term, 5 to 10 years. And then I think you left off another sentence. Do you want to add in here your question? Well, maybe I'm missing Earle. Earle, go ahead and put the rest of your question in the chat, or if you want to come on the screen, you're welcome to say it verbally.
His little mute doesn't show, so it's hard to know.
He's not logged in like the rest of us are.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I think to Ollie's point, I don't want to read too much into what he was asking, but like, as an organic farmer, you do think, not that most farmers don't think long-term, but I think as an organic farmer, you may be thinking a bit more longer term about all of those things that support you, be it your soils, be it your staffing. So
well,
let me,
one of the things that your answer to the question about profitability pointed out is you can't just go, well, organic gets 4 times more as a price for its product. That's great, but if it's sitting in your bin, it's getting 0. And maybe that's because there's not a pipe to get it from your farm to the next person, or maybe it's because for some reason they were glutted this year or whatever it is. But one thing that happens in the alternative space is that the distribution systems aren't huge and full of redundancy. That means you can just haul the potatoes to the place and somebody buys them. So, and then again, we find that producers, I was just talking with an impact investor this morning, a lot of and the value added question is now in the chat. A lot of the value added ideas are coming from producers. Well, they're really busy being farmers, and suddenly they're going to start a creamery, or they're going to start a blueberry processing facility or whatever. I mean, everything is landing on this producer. Now it's up to you to figure out how to do infrastructure in your industry. Well, good on you, but jeepers, you just really can't. It is a really hard problem. Now, I'll tell you about an interesting project in Maine that is kind of about that. And they have a food bank there that has a really nice balance sheet, actually. It's a huge food bank. And they're going to partner with a blueberry processor that has excess capacity, and they're going to buy a blancher, which is probably an $800,000 piece of equipment, and they're going to accept broccoli, that's it, from main producers that don't have anything to do with their excess broccoli at the end of the growing season, and they're going to freeze it. And then they've made a partnership with a regional grocery store chain, which is going to use that broccoli for all of its store-branded frozen broccoli. You know, they put all those partnerships together. It probably helps that the food bank has a huge balance sheet, and the woman used to work in the food industry, so she's kind of a whiz. And then, you know, all these pieces came together. That's the kind of project we're talking about that's kind of been placed on the shoulders of producers. So I just kind of point that out. That's not a very happy message. The project is great, but those are the kinds of things that people are undertaking to create all these systems that we take for granted in the conventional ag system.
You know, Rosalie, that's so true. You know, on our farm here, our mission is to increase the amount of organic acres in the Northern Great Plains. And so we feel like we need to have larger land stewardship happening. And right now, organic is only 1% of our cropland acres in Montana. So the joke we have on the farm is we sell things off in trucks, right? And our joke is like, oh man, if only we had a bagger and a bag zipper, we could just start packing stuff. And we've had several others that have invested in us say, well, oh my gosh, this pandemic's happened. Can't you just bag stuff? And if I could just ship it to where I sit in Chicago, I could totally sell it. But that takes a whole nother level when you're trying to farm, and the issues of climate change and trying to be timely around this are really tricky. So yeah, Mary, thank you so much for your question about that middle part, that product transformation processing, because that's an area where I think we've got to unpack. And so Mary, do you want to come on and ask some more questions related to that?
Hi, Anna, good to see you. And good to see everybody else. Yeah, and Rosalie, thanks for that. You definitely responded with the reality of what's going on for farmers is that they are focused on farming. But I also, in your comment too about the importance of partnerships, that's where we're seeing some successes is around partnerships to add value. And you know, here in Montana, we have a similar situation with the Livingston Food Resource Center, similar to the example you provided from Maine, where they have a commercial kitchen with capacity to do some processing, and that's creating a nice partnership in Livingston. With that said, I do think that we, as a food system, people who are embedded in the food system, need to be challenging ourselves to find these creative solutions, to develop these relationships so that we can hold more of the value of Montana produced organic food within the state of Montana. We're sending, you know, product out in a form where we're not reaping the full economic benefit of what we could be here in the state. So that's really all I have to say. I just think that that's probably a good challenge for all of us here in this Zoom room to really think about what those partnerships are that we need to develop, and are the funding sources enough right now? And I did add a piece of my question was, what funding sources besides the Montana Growth Through Ag program really are supporting value-added endeavors at the farm level, or perhaps partnered with the farmer?
Oh, great question. Does anyone have other examples of that?
There is the value-added producer grant program, a program that also would be similar, that has federal dollars available.
Jeff, while you're up, did you have another comment you wanted to share?
You know, what it comes down to me is that organic farms are necessarily more complicated, and that's a good thing, because they match ecology, which is much more complicated. Yet that complication makes farming, in a sense, managerially at least, harder and more difficult, and then adds to the burden of selling those complicated systems in terms of the diversity of products you sell, which also has the advantage because you grow things that are, you know, are rare and diverse and have, you know, have specialty, unique niches. And so we kind of are still, even despite all this growth, we're still operating in this kind of niche world where the infrastructure, but then again, we shouldn't, in some ways, we should say, we're goddamn lucky to have that situation, because if we were the opposite situation, we'd just simply be the repetition of conventional agriculture all over again. And I've had this debate with my daughters lots, and I said, well, you know, if the world was only that every farm in the United States was organic, but we ended up with the same structural problems that we have in agriculture that are severe and horrible, would that be at least better? And I would say, yeah, it's better, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to see history repeat itself. So we are in a sense creating a new kind of world. And so I would like to get into the idea of what I heard Doug talk about, this, you know, negotiating with these corporate, which are very, you know, these products are corporatized, you know, and these are big corporations who claim to be regenerative and all kinds of claims, but are they willing to share the value that they're reaping with the farmer? And can that level of negotiation occur? Or do we have to go through another cooperative moment where the power of the collective of farmers has to exert its power against these very powerful corporate interests? Or can there be a new kind of negotiation in the ownership of land? Can new people that are owning, maybe the dot-commers of the world, have a different perspective on how they want to invest in land? Or are they just investing to make money and then eventually take the farm away from you and sell it to whatever next best profitable interest they have? These are the levels of, you know, if we're gonna have a different world, we have to be talking about a different kind of power relationship. That's why I'm interested in blockchain. I want everybody to know exactly what the value of farmer is getting when they buy a product from a farmer, that how much of that dollar they spent is going to the farmer.
Right, right. Jeff, I think your point about, you know, the way I would phrase it is organic farming is a fundamentally different production system. And there's a significant push to move a lot of farmers to a fundamentally different production system, but we haven't fundamentally reworked the rest of the system that made us all go to this not very good system to start with, right? So this is where all of us collectively had to figure out new models and new creative ways of showing up. And so back to the chat, Mesa put in a question about if a school district has a central kitchen, what's their capacity to partner around processing food? Wow, that's pretty interesting. Like double use it not only to provide food for your students, but food for your community. Brandy, maybe you want to weigh in on that or have some thoughts.
I think that that's a great option for school districts that have central kitchens. I've often thought in Napa that we had some time in the afternoon to maybe partner with an organization like Meals on Wheels to provide food for an organization like that too. You know, in Napa, we had this wonderful facility, but we were really only utilizing it for part of the day. So I think there is the capacity to work with local farmers and growers and doing some sort of that work as well.
Yeah, we don't have to go it alone. I think we could think really differently about some of this. Oh, and I just saw Steve get up and leave, so I don't know if he's still here, but he put a comment in the chat that their farm successfully opened an on-farm store. Steve, are you willing to come share a little bit about that story?
Steve, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
How's that? No? Oh, okay, I'm good. Yeah, we'd been toying with the idea of an online store, on-farm store, and then using the internet and online ways of connecting with local community. And it's worked out quite well. And the pandemic gave us an extra boost because people were more into curbside pickup or driving out to the farm. And it made a difference in the bottom line this year. And it looks like these are some of the innovations. Other people have done this too. And it looks like these are some of the innovations that are going to change the overall system and the overall buying and consumer patterns. That's kind of the way I see it.
Well, thanks for sharing, Steve. How hard was that to stand up your store? I mean, for me personally, I just think, oh my gosh, I'd love to sell stuff online, but I have to clean it. I have to bag it. It feels like a heavy lift, but maybe that lift wasn't as big for you.
Well, having, worked with other CSAs and the Growers Co-op, and then knowing the local community and having a building we could just make a small room in and buy a reach-in cooler and a freezer. We're not talking large volumes. Our farm is not big and our profit margins aren't big, but for us, it really works. And I can see it working. It's a small scale change in the system. It wasn't that hard to set it up so people can come in, and it's pretty much an honor system self-serve. We don't have to spend a lot of time tending it. So it's, that's working for us.
And I'll throw in that the pandemic did that for my nephew too, who raises beef cattle in Wisconsin. That's the farm I used to live on. And they had a lot of restaurant sales they had built up over years. So the pandemic looked like disaster. And then individuals just completely filled in the void, actually calling and looking for beef. And I don't know if that was your experience, Steve, but God willing, those patterns will stick because it's been a big deal for him.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here quick with meat processing. Part of what the demand was the disruption in processing. So, right now, if you wanted to have a cow slaughtered, it's a good year out. So capacity is the problem.
Yeah.
I could jump in and briefly mention, I'd like to mention from our perspective at Timeless Seeds, the COVID-19 was exceedingly disruptive. It was both very positive and very negative. Our market shifted dramatically. We had a lot of bulk buying through distributors for grocery stores. People were stocking up and probably still are holding on to a lot of those stores right now because we do not have that demand that we had. We did have a huge spike in 1 pound packaging. Our restaurant trade and cafeteria services for universities and things like that really fell down, and it has not rebounded that much yet. So it's really disruptive, and I think that we're going to have to ride through this. And one other thing I would mention, we had a very productive year last year overall, especially for legumes. Remarkable production in most areas. So there's a lot of stores on the farm, and the markets are disrupted. So we're going to try to work through this.
Well, and maybe just to riff off of Jim on this disruption and seeing Mary's question here in the chat or comment in the chat is all of you who are sitting in different places of our food system in Montana, what are opportunities that you see where we could pull in some more philanthropic or positive integrated capital funding, mission focused funding that could help us actually stand some of this infrastructure up. It strikes me, I was on a panel yesterday with Kelsey Duchot, who's also part of the Intertribal Council, and they have a ranch in South Dakota. And she talked about the more that they could process things on the reservation and within our community, that allowed money to turn 7 times over inside their community on the reservation. And so the opportunities for us to create a positive reinforcing loop here in Montana are great. So put some things in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand or speak up here and share your thoughts around where do we need more help? Where can we just connect some dots that we already have? We know we have dots. Where do they need connections? Thanks, Steve, for joining.
I'll throw in a quick one, Anna, just to get folks started. In doing research, just to be able to talk to you guys, my big question is, who should a producer call? And the answer is there isn't a number. And so I did hear about some neat efforts to try to group up the financing options so people can have access to them. And one of them was Western Sustainability Exchange, which I think is more around ranching. There's Women in Farming, you know, there's some kind of, everybody's kind of out there on their own planet right now. And so I do think that, and I don't want to put more on the producers, like that is not needed. Now you guys need to organize an exchange for where the financing is. So I think the impact investors could perhaps take it upon themselves to at least not create a point of contact. That's ridiculous. That's just not practical, but somehow make it more transparent where the resources are, at least on the impact side.
Yeah, great question. And just as my own personal thought, you know, are there ways that those impact investors could make this easier? And because like, it's great that we have growth through ag and value added producer grants, but as a producer, oh my gosh, it feels like another giant heavy lift to fill out all that documentation and then handle the grant. And like, we've done some of that on our farm, but on the other end of the spectrum, we've also had an investor who we got to know and talk about our own operating needs. And one of those operating needs where we knew we could have a significant amount of cost savings is if we could buy fuel in bulk. So this investor actually stepped up and funded a double wall fuel tank. So we could buy fuel for our farm at 10,000 gallons at a time, which actually equated to 30 cents a gallon savings. And so our first load of bulk fuel saved us $3,000. And the magic of this is we worked with our investor. And again, this is a relationship, not a transaction. So our payment terms are based on what our fuel use is and what our cost savings would be. That's how we're paying the loan back versus a regular rate each year. So I think there's ways to think creatively about that too. Yeah, go.
And to respond to that a little bit, I mean, that's wonderful. I wish there were more angels out there like that. But what bugs me is why isn't General Mills doing that? Why isn't dot-commers that want to invest in land doing that? Why aren't they? Supposedly there's this movement in the corporate world where people are not only caring about their, you know, the dividends that they provide their shareholders, but actually that they are wanting to do social good. And there's all these claims of it, but I don't see those powerful entities being that kind of angelic behavior. That's what it.
Yeah, well, I think some of that might be just creativity. And we're stuck in an existing system of thinking about how to do things. So, you know, to Nathan's point, Nathan, you want to jump in here about your question about externalities? And then I see David LeZaks is on. So Nathan, go. And then David, I'm going to bring up your bio and let you share a little bit about your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it constantly strikes me, you know, externalities. And I think about it every time I go to, you know, our local farm that, you know, responsible farmers probably face a bigger climb on externalities than probably any other industry. I know it's felt every day, but the fact that you don't get credited for doing it the right way and your competitors get to make a profit, you know, almost regardless of the damage that they cause in their.
Oh, Nathan, you accidentally muted yourself, I think.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed at what the farmers have to face from an externalities. And I know that's a big one, but how much work is being done on the policy side to have rational pricing come in, both for the good you do when you produce food the right way, as well as competitors having to pay for the damage they cause and the way they produce food. I know that's a much bigger one, but in a more tangible example locally, and this is for Rosalie, like with MoFi, with these certified development financial institutions, you know, they're set up to help deal with those externalities, some because part of their capital comes through tax deductible donations. So that can help make up for those externalities and then have the capital to loan to, you know, responsible businesses. So I'm curious how an organization like MoFi could take, and I think it was Jeff's comment about businesses that claim to be trying to do the right thing, and the right food companies or investors could donate tax deductible money to an organization like MoFi and then there'd be loans available for whether it was infrastructure so that more farms could get access to things like school food purchases or hospital, where they already have infrastructure and purchasing systems in place. But that I can't answer for which pieces of infrastructure are missing that a values aligned organization like MoFi might be able to finance, which suddenly opens up all kinds of new markets because you have the equipment and facilities available.
Yeah, great questions. Keep thinking about that, and please put your ideas in the chat. I think we've got an amazing community here that could help with a lot of this. So David, LeZaks has joined us. Thanks, David. I really appreciate you jumping from one thing to another. I did share your bio just briefly earlier when we were doing the slide deck, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a bit, and then share what you're doing for farm viability and ideas you have around that on the chair that you sit in.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for having me here today. Apologies for coming in 3/4 of the time late. Was spending the last hour trying to convince impact investors from around the world to invest in sustainable agriculture for a number of different reasons. So this is my morning, I guess, is what I guess every day as well. But as Anna said, my name is David LeZaks. I'm a senior fellow at a nonprofit organization called Croatan Institute. Our mission is to harness the power of investment for social good and ecological resilience. Given that kind of investment and finance is a core theme of ours, but we really work as an organization across many different geographies and many different parts of the economy, whether it be racial equity, whether it be financial markets, whether it be climate change, and my focus in all that is agriculture. And in much of the work we're doing, and it's great to have so many of my partners here on the call who I'm involved in several different kind of cutting edge projects with, is trying to align these flows of capital that are around us at many different levels, everything from farm credit system banks to impact investors to public equity markets and some of these large food companies, and really trying to find ways in which we can construct capital for many different pieces of the value chain that better reflect the risks, the returns, and the impacts of more sustainable and organic agricultural systems. And in many cases, the financial instruments that are used today just aren't a good match for whether it's long-term crop rotations, whether it's reintegration or integration of animals in the landscape, whether it's going from a transition from a conventional production system to an organic production system. And over the last couple of years, we've worked with a couple of banks and supply chain companies to actually move forward with the first organic transition loan that's in coordination with Pipeline Foods and Compure Financial is offering one version of that, as is Rabobank. So we're beginning to see kind of innovations in this space, innovations that help to de-risk some of these sustainable, regenerative, organic, agroecological, choose your kind of favorite framing on the system, and finding ways in which farmers and ranchers can identify more routes for profitability, more routes for security, more ways in which we can effectively share risk across these value chains, including the investors and other sources of financing that help to support these agricultural value chains in the communities in which farmers and ranchers sit in.
Wow, thanks, David. I think I want to bring Jennifer back in and see what her thoughts are. Is farm credit partnering with other financial entities, or what's kind of farm credit's take on some of the supply chain processing world? If you don't mind, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but it seems like to really make this work in Montana, we're going to need some more investment and funding for those types of projects. Oh, I see, but maybe Jennifer didn't hear me. Are you out there still, Jennifer? All right, well, we'll come back. Other questions? Looks like Jeff's would be interested in blockchain. Do you have some thoughts on that, David?
Interestingly, I was just gonna figure out how to forward this onto the group. There's a report that I was interviewed for that just came out, and they're doing a webinar on impact tokenization and innovative financial models for responsible agricultural supply chains, part 1 of 2. There'll be a webinar next week, and I'll figure out how to get that information to you. But I think that, again, from this webinar that I was just on around, impact investors trying to identify routes to not only kind of monitor impacts, positive impacts from their investments, but we're seeing these impacts needing to be communicated across the supply chain. So not just to the source of the finance, but all the way in some cases to the consumer. And that's relatively easy when you have frameworks and standards in place like organic certification, but in other places and in things that organic necessarily doesn't cover, whether it be farmer livelihoods or whether it be certain human health metrics, there's kind of new and emerging tools, specifically in the data world, as blockchain is one example of that are kind of looking over the edge of the cliff and seeing how some of these emerging technologies relate to some of the challenges around communicating some of the suite of positive impacts.
Yeah, super interesting. There's a lot of really great resources coming in from everyone in the chat. That's one of the things I love about Montana is we're problem solvers, and when we can all put each of the pieces we're working on together, it makes this really wonderful stone soup. So Brandy, I'm wondering if we could pivot back a bit to the real tangibility. I mean, when we talk blockchain, I don't know, I'm not really grasping all of that, but the tangibility of how does the money piece flow on a Chef-Ann project? Or can you explain a little bit more about how that's been working for some of the producers you've been working directly with? And yeah, just share a little bit about that angle.
So Carolyn is on this phone call. She can probably talk a little bit about the finances of the Chef-Ann Foundation. Carolyn, I hate to put you on the spot. She's our development director.
Oh, sir, that'd be great, Carolyn. And I wasn't asking necessarily about the Chef-Ann Foundation, but if you want to share, that's great. I'm asking.
Sorry.
If you take a project like you invest in a school district and you bring in a kitchen, and how does that whole buying piece work between the farmers and the kitchen? Because that's another piece that we have to make happen now. Instead of having a big giant semi-Cisco truck show up, you have 4 or 5 or 10 farmers show up with stuff.
So, in Napa, through networking, I was able to be introduced to multiple different, farmers and growers and ranchers. And, we worked together on, we had a delivery dock at our central kitchen, and our central kitchen also had a warehouse where we were able to receive things. And, we worked with them on the price. In school food, you really only have about $1.25 to spend per meal, per child, per day. And also with that $1.25, you have to have 5 meal components on the plate: a protein, a whole grain, 8 ounces of milk, and a fruit or vegetable. So it's quite challenging.
Yeah, definitely not an easy thing. And maybe just to riff on this a bit more. So as a farmer, we've had contracts with buyers, and all of those contracts have very specific quality specifications in them. So, for example, we grew a grain oat crop this year, and it was beautiful. And then we harvested, and it was hot and dry, and the oats are too dry. So the buyer's like, sorry, can't take your bazillion bushels of oats. So how does those quality specs impact or work at that smaller scale between a school kitchen and a farmer? Or have examples, because in the era of climate change, and there's so much things that we can't control at a farm level. We can do everything right and put all the seed in the ground at the right time and care for it and sing to it and watch it grow, and then something happens and you don't have a product. And so part of our challenge that we've been envisioning is we can't think of farms as just widget producers anymore. So what happens when you have less widgets, or what happens when your widgets don't meet the criteria that your buyer needs?
Well, I did have a similar example. One of the years that a couple of the years that I was in Napa, I purchased cherry tomatoes from a local grower. And when I was first introduced to her, she was really game on wanting to work with us, really excited, wanted to come in for farmer tastings. And I explained to her about how we had salad bars in all of our schools and, the sheer volume that we were going through. And she assured me that she would be able to provide me, 100 flats of cherry tomatoes through Halloween. And then, once we actually got on to that, the first round of deliveries, she wasn't quite there. Second round of deliveries, they weren't really the beautiful colored cherry tomatoes that that she had promised me. And it kind of went on. And after a month, she contacted me and said, Brandy, I just can't fill this commitment. Like, this is way more than we had bargained for. So, I just had a backup plan, and I used our produce vendor who I knew was sourcing from the Central Valley. So they weren't necessarily coming from the county next door, but they were still coming from the state of California. So I think in school food, when you know your numbers and you know how many kids you're feeding per day and what your menu is going to be, it's just good to have a backup plan. Each state, as far as the USDA is concerned, has different purchasing agreements, purchasing thresholds that you have to commit to with different buyers. There's different levels of contracting. And for something small like that, it was just considered, like a small micro purchase. So, there wasn't a contract necessarily between us. So there was nothing that serious. So.
No, that's great. So you were able to have some resiliency in your view as a buyer. And then do you have any idea of how that impacted the farmer? I mean, I'm sure she felt terrible to not be able to provide you the cherry tomatoes, but what did that do to her bottom line? Do you know?
I don't know what it did to her bottom line, but I do think it made her better prepared for the next year, knowing the quantities that we would be looking for. I still wanted to work with her. I still wanted those local cherry tomatoes, but I just think it's when working with local producers, like I mentioned earlier, we were feeding 8,000 kids a day. That's a lot of food over the course of 180 days of school. So, just really drilling in the quantities that you need and all the requirements that, your products needed to meet.
Yeah, well, that's great that you wanted to have an ongoing relationship and not just a transaction. And I think for me, that's part of the magic of organic farming, is each farmer has a relationship with their land and their soil, and not that other farmers don't, but we're asking for more of that in the organic production system, our organic food system. But we need to figure out how we make relationships happen that are meaningful across the rest of the chain. Gosh, David, thanks for a lot of stuff on blockchain and a webinar. Please take a look at the chat, you guys, if you're interested in that. And then looks like, Mary, you have a question for Nathan. So I think I'll take that. And then I'm going to just do a little round robin wrap up with each of our panelists that you may have some closing comments or other thoughts to leave us with. So let me just take Mary's question. Nathan, could you speak a bit about how index-based insurance could be applied to some of these externalities that are not paid for currently? So could we flip this on its head and have an index-based insurance that's a reward for ecological services? He's thinking. He's got up from his map and he's thinking.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the question's looking for, or how are you thinking about the cost of purchasing that's indexed to something, or how the benefits are paid?
Yeah, I'm actually just challenging kind of how we think about things. As we know, insurance is paying out when a situation is unfortunate and there's not enough rainfall or not enough yield. But could we flip that on its head? And in your example that you gave at the beginning when you were doing your intro of just having donations of the philanthropic sector linked to the insurance world, I thought was really interesting. And, but is there a way that that this dialogue can, I guess, move forward? You know, there's, as somebody else indicated, that there's a lot of legislation or policy work that's happening at the state levels regarding payments for ecological services. And that's just in its infancy at this point. But could we start thinking about that from the insurance side as well? If there's a threshold that needs to be met in order for some type of payout. And I'm just, you know, totally spitballing here, but I just wanted us to try to think outside the box a bit.
Yeah, I would guess that most of that applies on the property and casualty side of the insurance world. On the individual side, where an individual's life is insured, or something like in the case of disability, it's it's much more distinct because the claim is really clear when it's happened, and we're able to take that business model and make sure, as you mentioned, that there's a percent of cash given to nonprofits like MOA each year, and then a really big part is how the assets of the insurance company itself are invested, because an insurance company is very much like a bank or a pension fund in that case, that they are willing to invest in things that have a 10, 20, 30, even 40-year duration, which is part of the reason we were interested in this, is that an insurance company can be a great capital partner for really long-term projects, and getting them to be more willing to look at, I think that's where the fluctuation on that side would come, that the financing, like Anna's example about the fuel, where they're not, okay, it's 20 years and you have to pay me a 5% interest rate and it's every month, regardless of what happened to the weather that year. I think that is an area where the insurance industry could contribute a lot. So if they're really more concerned about is the credit quality, like, is this a quality enterprise underneath it? But they do have, certainly the balance sheet and the longevity that maybe they could participate in more financing, where if it's a drought year or something's happened, that maybe it's only an interest only payment, and it can be much more flexible. I know there are things happening on the property and casualty side that I think speak a little more directly to what you were talking about, that can provide optionality in claims, depending on what's happened with things like weather and supply chains.
Thank you.
Thanks, David or Nathan. Looking at our time, and I know I think this has happened with every MOA webinar, Jamie, is that we all have lots of excitement and good energy and lots of dialogue. So Jeff, I recognize that you had a question here around crop insurance, and I'm going to just put that aside because I think we could talk about crop. We should have a whole nother webinar just on crop insurance.
Already, so that's okay, cool.
I would love to actually just go backwards in the order that we introduced ourselves with the panel, and just very much thank the panel for the preparation time and the thoughtfulness that you have brought to this dialogue. And so in closing, if we were to do one thing here in Montana to help make our organic food system work better for all of us, what would that be? So David, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you're first up.
My recommendation would be, when you run into problems and challenges, make sure that others inside your community and outside your community know what those are, whether it relates to markets or insurance or agronomy or anything like that, because there's a whole network of folks like myself and others on this call who want to make sure that farmers and their allies are supported in being the stewards of our land and providing good food for us. So I'll stop there.
No, that's great. You don't have to go it alone. So speak your challenges.
Exactly.
Nathan, how about you?
I think what stands out to me here is seeing the combination of what I saw with MOA, the state of Montana, and the Sheehy Foundation, and actually having MoFi and Rosalie's expertise there. Is, if I looked at one thing, I guess I'd be really interested to see, Brandy had mentioned they have a particular program at the Sheehy Foundation called Get Schools Cooking. And can you pick a district or a group of districts, more rural in Montana that could do this? I think it would be exciting to try to raise the funds so that Chef Ann could institute that Get Schools Cooking, and right from the beginning know that the whole intent was as high a percentage of the food as possible from that district or group of districts would be purchased in state. Because of course, once you do it once, hopefully you can replicate it throughout school districts in the state. So that's, to me, a very concrete, exciting project. And if financing is required, hopefully we can bring in, our insurance company or MoFi or Clearwater, or, there's lots of financing. Jennifer, it seems like you have the number of people necessary to provide the financing you need to make that happen.
Thanks, Nathan. I love these pragmatic things. It's great to talk big picture, and then it's nice as the farmer in me, I want to do something. So Jennifer, how about you?
So one thing I think is just as a farmer, taking a look at your operation, understanding it, making sure you have your financials put together, and then reaching out to partners in your community as resources, having that accountant there, having your insurance agent there, having your banker there, and bringing those people to your essentially your board within your organization and your operation to understand what's working, what's not, and what resources are potentially out there. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. It's kind of a riff off David, like use the resources that you have. Brandy, how about you?
So, I'll just piggyback on what Nathan said as well. I mean, we would love to be involved with more school districts in the state of Montana. There's 30 million children that rely on the National School Lunch Program every day to get their food. And, it's just really important that we're taking care of them through good food. And I think that there is a place for Montana farmers to work with farm to school organizations and school districts. So just want to encourage everyone to explore that option.
Great. Maybe when the pandemic's over, I can come to California and eat some of that lunch. It looked really good. Thank you for sharing and your ideas and story. And Rosalie, we've come full circle. So back to you.
Yeah, well, I just had to reflect on what an honor it's been to be with these smart panelists, and with you, Anna. You just bring so much wisdom yourself to facilitating this across such a broad spectrum. So. And also with all the producers on the phone, I just feel very humble and honored to be with you. I think I have one thing divided in two parts. David and I have been working a little bit on this. I think the one thing we got to do is create a new mental model for farm financing, because the model that we have just doesn't fit. And I don't really think that is an abstraction. I think we need to think about how to make the money fit the use. And I'm very interested in that. And the second part is what I realized from getting ready for this call, and this I will commit to helping with, is that the impact investors need to be a little more transparent about what's out there and where it is and how to access it. And some of the folks I talked with to get ready to talk with you guys are interested in that too. So maybe that's something we can stay connected on.
Oh, that's great. Well, Jamie, I took some notes here, so I'll send the 5 pragmatic things to you in an email. Maybe we can figure out how to move out on them with MOA. So with that, just another big thank you to the panelists and spending time with all of us today. I know I'm feeling a little Zoom fatigue myself, but this was super energizing and I always learn a lot. So Jamie, I'll hand it to you to close us out.
Thank you, Carey and Nathan and Anna and Rosalie and Brandy and Jennifer for putting together such an awesome presentation. Please let me know if you'd be interested in continuing the conversation. And the beauty of getting used to Zoom is that we can gather this way and not have to invest in a person in face-to-face event. So. Yeah, please reach out to me. You'll get a request for an evaluation of the session. So please fill that out. That helps us do better next time. So thanks everyone, and hope to see some of you at this discussion with Mike Calicrate on mobile meat processing today at 1.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.